Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again for yet another episode of the 247 Real Talk podcast. It's an unusual time for me to be recording. It's Thursday, October 23rd. It's in the afternoon. Usually I record at night, and when I miss my Wednesday night recording, I do it on Thursday night. But there's so much going on, and over the coming weeks, I'll tell you about my wife's new business she launched with these amazing hand-poured organic candles and other things that are just, I've gotten this massive response to the locations she's been at to showcase them. So maybe if she's in, near, or maybe you want to go online, she'll have a website soon. You might be interested trying it out. I think you'll like it. No, it's not a shameless plug. It's what we do to support each other, and the fact that I'm proud of her for doing what she's doing. So I wanted to say that right off the bat. How are you? How was your week? Yesterday I saw, for the first time, I went to see my surgeon for the first post-op visit, and they did x-rays, and I was able to see both my knees together on an x-ray, and I've got to get I've got to get a picture from them, so maybe next time I can throw it up on the screen for those of you who watch the YouTube podcast, so you can actually see what this thing looks like with the whole top of the knee and the bottom of the knee, I guess you call it, the bottom part of the leg, the top part, and then this circular sort of piece that goes into the kneecap. It's interesting to see, and it all shows up very clearly in white on the x-ray. So hopefully I can get a photo of that next time. It was remarkable to see how both of my knees looked. They looked very similar. One of the kneecaps looked in a little different position than the other one, but I'm assuming that has more to do with where it was needed than it was not put in correctly. At least I hope not, right? So I hope you had a great week. On my way to the doctor yesterday and back, and on the way back home, I wasn't feeling my best in spirit and in mind, and I'm still trying to track down, what are these things that are impacting how I feel. So I want us to chat a little bit about that and what I'm going through and what you're going through and what we need to do to make sure that we control how we feel. So sit back, relax, and I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. So, like I said, I told my wife, I said, I can't describe how I'm feeling. I can't describe what I'm going through. There are things that are impacting my mood, my joy, my internal joy. And there are all these things coming at me, right? There's a situation of work that I've said to you, I've explained to you, I've discussed with you many times. I think God is answering my prayers, and that He is managing to maintain some distance of communication between me and that manager who is relentless, who has decided that I am responsible for every single thing, from the color of rice to the air we breathe. And if it's not perfect, it's my fault. In a big organization of close to 800 people, a big department, she has sort of honed in on 2 or 3 people, and I happen to be one of them. There's a lot I would want to say about that, but I don't think this is the appropriate forum to say it. And so yesterday, going to the surgeon, coming back, I was trying to, as I'm driving, or instead of driving, but in the car, alone, with my thoughts, and yes, driving, I should say, and in case you have in your mind, what does that mean? I use a cane, I use a walker sometimes. I get into my car. I can't drive because the knee that had surgery is the left knee. you drive with your right foot, right? So as long as I can pull the knee in sort of and get it in the truck, I have a big truck, and straighten it out, I can drive. Probably not the most practical thing to do, or not probably not the best choice of things to do, but I've got to get to the surgeon, and my wife has other, she's working and she has other obligations with the kids. So I made it, and I made it back, and it's okay. It's not something I do every day. My truck is parked all the time, so when necessary, I had to. Anyway, the point is that I was alone with my thoughts, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm trying to figure out, why am I feeling this way? And this morning I woke up and I knew I had meetings with that manager or whatever scheduled for early this morning, and I prayed a lot. I have this dedicated time I set aside each morning for conversations with God, with conversations with my Creator. And I prayed a lot about it, and then I came downstairs to the office, which is where we are, office/studio, and I logged into work. And as I'm looking at my calendar, I see the meeting, and as I'm watching it, the meeting disappears. Turns out that this manager's out of office this week, and so the meeting was moved to next week. Now, there's a number of things happened there, right? One thing that happened was my spirits were immediately lifted. It was like half of the internal battle I'm going through disappeared at that moment. The second thing that happened is it became very evident that however I process things, the oppression that I'm subjected to by this individual is actually impacting me in a massive way. And then third, I also recognize in that moment that it's oppression delayed, right? Because next week there's a meeting anyway. And actually next week I have a number of meetings with her. And then I thought about it in terms of life. And in terms of all that we're doing in a time of the world today where things are so difficult. And I realize that in this world today, people's emotions are all over the place. People are struggling. People are trying to do exactly what I'm doing for different reasons, whether it be figuring out your finances, figuring out your job. Someone said to me the other day, when the government shutdown first happened, people were crying out for mortgage relief, and they sent me a message. They don't live in this country, they live in another country, and they said, well, the government shutdown just happened a couple of days ago, and people are crying out for mortgage relief. Don't most people follow a plan to have a few months, 2 or 3 months of mortgage saved? I said, well, that, in theory, that's a wonderful thing, but most Americans can't do that. Apart from the average cost of living, the normal cost of living, I have to point out that in jobs like government, many times people meet each other on the job. There are a lot of scenarios where both husband and wife work for some branch of government. And what this shutdown might have meant to some families is that the one breadwinner, calling it 2 breadwinners in a family, one breadwinner might have lost their job with the cuts that were done several months ago when this administration took over, and many government federal workers were let go. And now this person who was impacted by the government shutdown not getting paid might have been the only breadwinner left. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn who saying, I worked for the federal government, I have all these qualifications, I'm looking for a job. And so as I thought that through, one thing I began to learn is everything is perspective, right? So when we think about our challenges today, we should not think about them in a vacuum, even though we may feel that we're impacted in a vacuum. We should always recognize that there are solutions. There has to be one, because the fact is that we are not the only ones impacted by what we're feeling. Everyone around us, even people who are filthy rich, have different issues, right? We see people who are very rich, doing things that we wonder, why would you do that? You have all the money in the world. Well, because our emotions and our feelings are impacted by things that that are specific to us and our us as individuals and our ability to process them and to be able to rationalize and to get past them. Me personally, I use prayer. And it is the prayer that I use even when I'm not at the point where I have managed to gather all of my faith to overcome any fear. I'm working on it, and God's working on me, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. But many people have different ways of processing. But the challenges, the feelings, the risks remain the same universally for us, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, no matter what. Each one of us in this world is struggling for something. And those of us who happen to be subjected to what's going on in the world around us right now more than others, there is a lot to process. And as I thought about it, again, I go back to my faithful pastor, and he sent me something that says, what you think, you create. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you become. I'm going to read it all together again, then I'm going to break it down, and then we'll be done with this episode for this week. So, what you think, you create. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you become. So let's start with the first part. What you think, you create. That is so much a mirror I'm looking into, right? I think that the day will be difficult. I think that the day will be unhappy. I think that the environment at work will be horrible. I create that. Because even though I know that I'm a faithful man, I pray, I am human. None of us is perfect. And when I allow those thoughts to come into my head and consume my thoughts, then what I think I create. And it's evident, for instance, in the example I gave you today, because the minute I realized that manager was not going to have that meeting today, immediately my mood changed. Which meant to me, as I read through this, that the minute my mind thought that catalyst for the oppression and for the unhappiness, the unpleasantness of my day was no longer there, I felt better. But that is something that could or could not have happened. Everything I felt was based on what I thought. And these are the things I have to overcome, and these are the things that you have to overcome. As you go through the challenges of life, I have another dear friend of mine. She said to me, I was explaining to her yesterday my situation. She said to me, I don't look at things as a pessimist. And she called me pessimistic in that sense. She says, I let things happen before I react. I don't react and preempt them, because then I'm creating an atmosphere. I'm creating an issue for myself that might not exist. And that's exactly what I keep doing. And it's the struggle I'm in. I'm going to win. My prayers and my faith will win. I have no doubt. But I'm telling you about my journey. Because each and every one of you, whether you may sit there and shake your head and agree with what the advice I've received and say, yes, Julian, you shouldn't do that. Some other place, somewhere else in your life, you are dealing with a challenge that's different, but in many times manifesting itself in the same result. And it says, what you feel, you attract. So once you feel downtrodden, you attract that. It's like, they always say, certain type of people attract similar people. Right? People who are critical attract other people who are critical. People who are unkind tend to attract other people who are unkind. Birds of a feather flock together, so to speak. It is true. And then the last part says, what you imagine, you become. And that's many days when I've walked into the atmosphere that I so feared. And with no way to turn, I continue to pray and keep my thoughts close to my faith. And I imagine myself being happier. I imagine myself being less subjected. I imagine myself being in a place where that person cannot affect me. And by the end of the day, I look back and say, wow, your day got better. You didn't even realize when it did, because you simply couldn't do anything about those circumstances of that person being there and being oppressive. But you put it into perspective and you imagine that person did not have that kind of power over you. You did not take the flight approach. You took the approach of, that person does not control how I feel. They don't control my happiness. Yes, they can be unpleasant. They can be unkind. They could speak to me with disdain and disrespect. And it's not used as a human being to absorb all of that negative energy and just walk away happy. But if you keep telling yourself, they have no power over me, that is them expressing themselves because that's who they are. And I should actually probably feel sorry for them that's what they need to qualify their existence and their presence. Many people who who are narcissists especially, and inflict their unhappiness and their oppression on others because of their positions of power, that's actually what they're doing in exercising their ability to be happy, because that's the only thing that satisfies them. And the minute you take that power away by not letting them do that, at first they become angry and angry and angrier, but eventually they no longer have that power over you. I'm in that mid-ground somewhere now. I'm getting to the point where I'm recognizing the moments when I need to stand and say, I'm imagining myself that I'm strong, I'm happy, I'm independent, and that person does not have the kind of power over me that I'm giving them. And it reflects itself in my presence. It reflects itself, I want to almost believe, outwardly. Maybe people who are sitting in the same meeting on the cameras are seeing that presence in my expression that changes to one from slouching and being in regression almost to being at peace and not allowing, and facial expressions not showing or giving that person power over you because you're not reacting in that manner. Sometimes we even need to politely speak out and say, I can do this, but this is not the way to do it. We are living in a time where the world is unkind. We're living in a time where there's a lot of strength that you're going to need to get through these times. We're living in a time of uncertainty. We're living in a time of oppression. We're living in a time where unkindness seems to be victorious, but I promise you it's temporary. As you go through this weekend and this week ahead, I hope that what I'm saying to you about what I'm going through and how I'm overcoming it will be an inspiration to someone, one or many of you who've been through challenges. A dear friend of mine who had been struggling with cancer, and I think I've mentioned him before, and his strength, got a clean bill of health the other day. And I want to think that the words of support and empowerment from those people around him are part of what actually contributed to his strength to stand through the process and his healing. We need each other. There's things we can do alone, yes, but when we need strength, we need each other. And we need someone to remind us of how strong we can be. We need someone to remind us that when we take away the power of others over ourselves, and when we use the power of a positive mind, when we go again, we think good things to create good things. When we give ourselves the empowerment to feel better and stronger, happier, we attract happiness. And when we imagine ourselves no longer under the oppression, but successful and victorious, we become it. And when you need something else or some form of reinforcement of that empowerment, there's prayer. So whatever you're going through today, financial, health, jobs engineer like me, families, children, there's so many things around us. Remember that the power of prayer can overcome. For those of us who've seen our Creator act time and time again, we know how great He is. We know that our Creator's ways are so much bigger than ours. And we know that the promises are real. So as I leave you in this episode, and I wish you an amazing week and weekend, a week ahead, I'm going to leave you with a prayer of empowerment. I think I forgot to tell you before I leave that next week, Monday, I start outpatient physical therapy for those of you who follow my journey. I will tell you that the left knee out of surgery is miles ahead of the right knee when it came out of surgery. So I'm in a decent place. I will tell you that the pain is being managed very well, and that the hours between pain medication are getting longer and longer. So I'm getting there already. I think I am months ahead of where I was at this time, 2 weeks out of my first surgery. And I thank every single one of you for your words of encouragement and for your support. So for those of you who need something to stand tall, to walk strong, to lift your head up, and to know that you're not only not alone, but you will be okay. Believe it. Create it. You are it. I leave you with this prayer. Lord, my source and strength, enrich my mind, heart, and spirit with your love and truth. Enrich my faith and help me to trust you more each day. Enrich my skills, knowledge, and abilities. Help me to work diligently, ethically, and with integrity. Fill me with your wisdom and guidance as I explore new opportunities for growth, success, and personal development. Enrich me so I grow physically, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Cultivate in me the virtues that lead to a meaningful and purpose-driven life. Enrich my life today. Have a great week, a great weekend. Until the next time, please take care of yourselves and each other.